Welcome back to another history video prepared by ALau. As you might not know, I'm a high school graduate in Hong Kong who has just finished my Diploma of Secondary Education exam. This summer break allowed me to share what I have learned in my 2.5-year-long high school life. In this video, I will explain to you what are the peacekeeping efforts used by the powers between 1919 and 1929. The League of Nations will be discussed in another separate video. To begin with, these peacekeeping efforts include disarmament conferences, and treaties. As World War II broke out in 1939, it is evident that these peacekeeping efforts did not work exceptionally well in dealing with aggressions. But is this the whole story? Were there any other factors that limited the effectiveness of these peace efforts? Firstly, the Washington Conference, also known as the Washington Naval Conference, was held between 1921 and 1922. Beyond Europe, tensions increased between the US and Japan. Japanese power in the Far East had grown enormously during World War I, and now posed a huge threat to US trading interests. A naval arms race seemed inevitable. Largely focusing on disarmament and naval power, the Washington Naval Conference led to a series of treaties that appeared to guarantee the peace in the Far East at the time. Japan had agreed to withdraw some of its territory acquired in China and to limit its navy to 3/5 the size of British and US navies. Large cruisers were controlled at a ratio of 10 to 7 between US, Britain, and Japan. In return, the Western powers promised not to develop any new naval bases near Japan. Britain, the US, France, and Japan guaranteed to protect China against invasion. Secondly, the Genoa Conference, which was held in 1922. The powers believed that the major threat to peace at the time was the issue of German reparations. Determined to keep Germany weak, France insisted that payments must be made in full. Alarmed by the hostile relations between Germany and France, British Prime Minister Lloyd George suggested that a conference be held between France and Germany to improve their relations. However, the conference had achieved nothing as countries decided not to attend. First, it was the US who was determined to pursue an isolationist policy and declined to attend. Germany quickly withdrew in the face of France's refusal to compromise. Russia wanted to develop its relations with Germany and then backed out. Thirdly, the Dawes Plan, which was rolled out in 1924. French angering Greece drastically in the following year when Germany once again failed to meet the reparations requirement. French troops occupied the Ruhr, which was one of Germany's most important industrial regions, and seized coal and timber by way of payment. The actions of France was said to be uncivilized and barbarous. Confronted with this clear threat to peace and national sovereignty, a conference was held in London in 1924. It was chaired by US lawyer and financier Charles Dawes. Although no reduction was made to the figure of £6.6 billion that Germany would have to pay in reparations, it was agreed that its annual payments would be restricted to what Germany could reasonably afford. A sizable loan to Germany was provided by the US, which unfortunately ended after the Wall Street crash. Feeling assured, France withdrew from the Ruhr and tensions reduced. Fourthly, the Locarno Treaties. The treaties were hoped to create greater stability and security in Europe. The significant outcome of the Locarno Conference was that Germany, Belgium, and France promised to respect their joint frontiers in the West. No military action could be taken unless it was considered defensive. In addition, a treaty of mutual guarantee was signed. This stated that Britain and Italy would come to the assistance of any country that fell victim to an act of aggression in violation of the Locarno Treaties. Britain pledged to come to France's aid in event of a future German attack. The treaties also marked a major turning point in international affairs, symbolizing the effective working relationship that had developed between Aristide Brand and Gustav Strassmann, the foreign ministers of the nemesis nations, France and Germany. To emphasize Germany's good intentions towards France, Straussmann also accepted the permanent laws of Alsace-Lorraine, Eupen, and also Malmedy. However, there were some flaws in the Locarno Treaties. There were no fundamental which were fundamental and directed the action of aggressors in 1930s. Firstly, there were no limits to defensive wars. The term defensive war was vague and ambiguous. Secondly, Britain had a hidden agenda of limiting its moral obligations to France. Thirdly, Britain was not committed to military action. Fourthly, there were no guarantees to German borders with Poland and Czechoslovakia in the east. This allowed Hitler to strive for Lebensraum in the east in 1930s. The insincerity of the nations in reaching peace also led to an uncertainty in the treaty's effectiveness. Fifth, the Kellogg-Briand Pact in 1928. It was signed by no fewer than 65 nations. Briand, the foreign minister of France, proposed to the US to sign an agreement to renounce war. The US hoped to extend the treaty to more nations. However, the pact contained no indication of what steps might be taken against any country that subsequently broke the agreement, and this lack of clarity ultimately made it worthless. The isolationist US showed no commitments even after signing the treaty. Sixth, the Young Plan, which was initiated in 1929. The Young Plan was probably the best example of France's new willingness to compromise. The US knew that despite the Dawes Plan, once Germany had to meet its full payments, it would no longer be able to afford its interest payments on US loans. A committee chaired by the American banker Oman Young met to discuss the possibility of reducing the total figure of indemnity. The outcome of the discussion was that the final sum of the German reparations decreased from 6.6 billion to 2 billion pounds, which was originally suggested by British economist John Maynard Keynes in 1919. The international effort stated above was found between 1919 and 1929, when the international tensions decreased. Historians believe that the issue of German reparations were so important in that period. Keynes, as mentioned above, was the leading economist of the early 20th century, and he advocated the proportional and justified treatment of German economic punishment or punitive damages. In his book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, 1919, he argued that the reparations were vindictive and would lead to problems because of Germany's inability to keep up with the payments. That is the end of this video here. Hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something about the interwar period. The next video we'll be talking about the League of Nations.